Hi, I'm Jonathan, and welcome to First Last Everything, a podcast where I chat to guests about their relationship with technology through their first love, last obsessions, and that piece of tech that meant everything to them. Each item a guest brings to the show could be anything from a piece of software to a computer to a weird gadget to that first camera. Pretty much anything goes. This time I'm joined by Esther Huybreghts. Esther is the co-founder and producer of the award-winning app PokPok. Since the app launched in 2021, it's won an App Store Award, an Apple Design Award, and many other commendations. PokPok was also recently included on Time's list of the 100 most influential companies of 2025. This is a really wonderful interview, and PokPok is a really special app. Plus, stay tuned at the end for a little bonus. So, First Last Everything with Esther Huybreghts. Let's go! Esther, firstly, I apologise for butchering your last name, but thank you so much for taking the time to chat with me. And most importantly, thank you for PokPok. It's brought so much joy to both my daughter and my wife and me over the last year or so. Thank you for being here.
I'm very happy to be here. It's okay that you try to pronounce my last name. I will forgive you for that because sometimes I can barely even pronounce it myself. So
yeah, it's a tough one, but it's a good one. So I normally start out these episodes by asking my guests what they think about their relationship to technology is in general. So I wonder what yours is, but especially since your job is actually thinking about kids' relationships to technology, I'm particularly interested to hear what your relationship is. And do you find one influencing the other at all?
So my relationship with technology has always been a very balanced one in a way where I try to be very mindful about the way that I use technology in my life. As a kid, I was very interested in technology. I grew up with like the desktop computer sitting in my mom's bedroom that I could occasionally go on. My dad had one of the first iMacs with like the half bowl and the swivel screen, and even before that, the cube. So I was like, my dad was definitely very Apple-minded right from the start. So I was very interested in that. As a kid, I wanted to have my own laptop. I couldn't get one. They wouldn't buy me one. Made sense because like they cost so much back then, still do. So I just made them out of cardboard with like changeable screens made out of paper. And I was just like, I would integrate tech in my life in a way, the only way I knew how, by crafting them myself, because I was like, it was a very fascinating thing to me. Now when I'm as an adult, I think because I make an app, I'm always on screens. I'm always with my computer, with my iPad, with my phone, and it's a very difficult thing to turn that off for myself. I'm always online in a way, especially because my entire team is based in Canada, in Toronto, and I'm based in Belgium. So to have that time difference means that I have like a full day of working, and then at my 3 p.m., that's when my team starts. And that's when I also have to be online and present for them in a way, or at least available for comments or for feedback. So even at night, it's difficult to just turn my brain off because there will always be some kind of tech pinging me, giving me notifications. And I think that is annoying in a way, but also I have a great team and they will respect the boundaries that I set. So that's also like, that's a good thing. And then aside from that, obviously, like as most people of our generation do, like I have a pretty unhealthy relationship with social media that I would like to turn off and get better at, especially as my kids grow a little bit older and I want to set the right example. But for now, it's proving difficult, if I'm honest.
I wanted to dive straight in with your first pick, which is the first piece of technology that really inspired you. What is that?
The piece of tech that I picked was a very silly looking digital camera by Fujifilm. I picked that one because, as I call it, like I think that has been one of the catalysts in my life to where it really pushed my life into the direction that I am now. So for that piece of tech to enter into my life, I have to rewind time to 2003 or something, because I think that's when it, like, that specific camera launched into the world. So we are I grew up in a very creative family where we are all artists. We're all drawing. My sister's a writer. My mom and my dad are both very good at art and drawing and painting and all of that. But my dad was also a good hobby photographer, because his dad used to be a photographer. And when I was on a trip with my dad, he noticed that I love taking pictures with his digital camera, and I was looking for like the way the light hit in like a like a puddle of water, and like the way the shadows were reflecting in there. Like, it was, I remember that specific moment where I was like, ooh, I enjoy looking for like the beauty in the frame. So for my birthday, he got me a very cheap digital camera that could take pictures, but also record video in like 3 pixels big or something. Like, it was like it was a very shitty basic camera, because obviously like my parents aren't going to get me like a super expensive digital one. But it really opened up a whole new world for me, where like I was in charge of the pictures that I took and the video that I took. And then I also had like, our first computer was also like a swivel little iMac. Was it even an iMac back then? I think so. Like with like the half bowl with a swivel screen. We had iMovie on there. So I was making my own video clips to the music that I was listening to by filming like very experimental shots and doing stuff, just like, and I was learning how to edit all on my own. There weren't like YouTube videos back then on how to edit, so I was just figuring out iMovie all by myself. I learned Photoshop by looking at what my dad was doing, because that was part of his job. So because I always grew up in like that creative family where failure wasn't necessarily like an option or whatever, it was more like failure is part of it. It's just part of trying and learning and figuring stuff out. I think the old iMac and that little camera provided a digital playground for me in a way that I hadn't experienced before, that really inspired me to push iMovie and push my own skills to the limit, to see like, what can I make with this? How can I make my own? And like, obviously, like I never published any of this. Again, like YouTube wasn't a thing back then for me. I don't even think it existed already, or like maybe it's like most basic form.
Yeah, probably not. No, 2000. So we should say this is the Fujifilm Digital Q1 camera, which was released in 2003. It had 2 megapixel. It was a 2 megapixel digital camera. It had a digital zoom, so not an optical zoom. And yeah, it had it recorded in JPEG and AVI format, so it was like pretty, and you can get it for about, I think, like $100. So it was pretty on the cheap level, but it is a very fun looking camera. It's like a circular with a small little handle on the side. It's very cool.
It's like when I Googled it, I didn't even remember what its name was, so I just Googled funny looking circular digital camera. And I was guessing around like which age I got it, which would have been 2003, 2004, because I think it was for my 13th birthday. So I was just like Googling the most random stuff just to come up with that camera then. And it's like on one of the lists of like ugliest cameras of like the year 2003, which I take offense by, because it just looks silly. It's a funny little guy.
It is cute. Yeah, I've got to say, it's not. I read a couple of things saying that it was just like kind of ugly looking and a bit weird, and I'm like, no, it's fun, especially for back in 2003, where still probably the era of very beige computers. I mean, obviously the iMac was the big standout, being something weird and like cool and different. But something like this, even though it's sort of grey, it has a cool little look to it, which is really great. Did you keep it?
Oh, I think it must be at my mom's somewhere. But I'm sure it's still lying around, because she never chose anything out. But like the funny thing is that like I was in middle school back then, and I was just like learning to edit on my own, taking pictures on my own, in a very big obsession with Lord of the Rings and Pirates of the Caribbean, so also learning Photoshop and editing my own pictures to have me stand next to all of the elves and trying to make it look real. But like I built my skills by myself like that. And when I was 16, 17, I think it was 15, 16, I was my parents thought it would be cool for me because I was so interested in making films and doing photography that I would change high schools to go to like a direction where it was a lot of photography, and like the course was photography and videography. So you would be, that was like the direction you would be taking. So like you had like your basic maths and Dutch classes, of course, because that was like, I'm in Belgium, I'm a Dutch speaker. But you also had like 4 hours of photography every week, 4 hours of videography where you would be learning to edit your videos and just like kind of set you on that creative path. I really enjoyed doing that. So after that, I went to college to become a film director because I really enjoyed the editing, but like coming up with the stories. I wasn't the best of my class for sure. I was just like happy to be in the middle and just doing my thing.
Yeah.
But I really wanted to pursue that direction of becoming a film director or doing something in film maybe. So I went to college to the Ritz School of Film and Photography in Brussels. And I think I took 2 years there where I noticed that I wasn't going to be like in the top of my class there. So I enjoyed doing it, but I wasn't really comfortable in like the leadership role that you are supposed to take on when you want to become a film director. So at the same time, I got together with my husband and, then boyfriend, now husband. And he was doing 3D animation and 3D design in another college. And we both decided to drop out of the respective courses that we were in and do animation together. So we just like do everything around because I was always like, I'm very good at drawing. I love drawing. And we wanted to do something together. And we were always coming up with little animated shorts in our spare time. So we just decided to then like move into the animation part of film school. And that's where we both graduated in. And that's how we then ended up starting PokPok and the whole story there. So for me, that little camera really kickstarted me on like my own digital journey of learning how to edit digital footage, whether it's photography or videography or anything like that on a computer. And that just really set me on the path that I am now. And I think like if I hadn't gotten that camera back then, I probably would have been doing something completely different.
Yeah, no, I totally see that. I think I definitely have a similar sort of trajectory. A few years sort of before you, my dad got a Apple Mac Performer, so still like a beige one, and I sat there on Photoshop for hours, just like teaching myself in the same way that you did, like, you know, superimposing things on other things, drawing. My thing at the time was like, I was pretty into like South Park, like right at the beginning. So I was like creating South Park montages and collages and stuff like that. I find it interesting how you taught yourselves all these things from scratch, just from, in a way, a kind of Montessori type way, like you're just doing it, which is then sort of progressed into PokPok, which is based around kids discovering things by themselves. And that's essentially what you did with your first piece of technology, the camera, and then also on the Mac with Photoshop and iMovie and stuff. I find that it's an interesting through line, really.
Yeah, I completely agree. And with PokPok, I always, like, we call them, like, all of the little segments that you have in PokPok, we call them toys as opposed to games, because games are defined by their set of rules that you have to adhere to as a player, with the like a winning aspect, a losing aspect, a progressing aspect of trying to beat levels and beat scores or collecting things. Like, it's the definition for a game is a lot more narrow as opposed to what PokPok offers kids, which is definitely more toy-like in a way. I always like to think of PokPok's toys as tools for kids' imagination, because that is what I grew up with as a kid, and like that is where I got the most creativity out of, is what, like, when my toys became tools for, or like vehicles for my imagination. So a toy like wooden blocks or a toy like Legos is very similar in a way, where if we were sitting at a physical table right now and I would just like pour a pile of Legos in between us, I guarantee you that both you and I would be just like tinkering with the Legos, building something while talking or giving it like our full attention. And it doesn't matter how good we are at playing with Legos or how good we are at building. It's about the skill you bring to the table, and the Legos are not judging you for that, or not imposing judgment, or not setting rules of like, you have to make this with this specific toy, like this is my function. No, like you can do whatever you want with the Legos. And it's also about like the intent you bring to the hypothetical table of, do I want to build something very challenging today? Do I just want to take it easy and just tinker away and we'll see where it leads? And I think PokPok brings a lot of that similar energy, where it's as difficult or as hard or as challenging or as fun as you make it for yourself, or like for the kid. Like they are completely in charge of how they want to play with PokPok, as opposed to other games for kids that just tell them straight up like, this is the game, this is what you have to do, this is how you progress. And PokPok is just like a tool for however they want to approach it that day. And it was very similar for me back then with iMovie. Like if I wanted to make something very simple, that was fine. The interface was very approachable in a way, where it wasn't too difficult, it wasn't very daunting, it's very basic, but you could do really fun stuff with it if you knew how to work the basics.
Before we talk about PokPok, you joined Snowman in 2018, correct? So what did you do when you joined?
That sounds about right. I was like, my husband had joined before that, and we were basically just two artists working at Snowman. So it was because the games that they were making back then, they had just launched Alto's Adventure, they were working on Alto's Odyssey, and I was also just doing some additional artwork more at the ending, because like the most of the development was already done for that, but also just like very generic stuff like making a poster for events or making stuff for their social media, which like social media has changed so much over the past couple of years. Stuff for their blog, app icons, very basic stuff. Just an artist role. And PokPok started as a hobby project because my husband and I weren't really working together on a lot of things anymore, and we wanted to find something that was just the two of us as a hobby project. That would allow us to do something creative, just the two of us again, because we missed that from back in school.
Yeah, I think the birth of PokPok Playground, it has a really interesting kind of inception, which I've read before, but I wonder if you could tell us that story of how you actually came to sort of come up with the idea for it, and how it came to be with you and your husband and your kids.
When my husband and I were working at Snowman, we were both on our computers very often. We had our phones, we were just like on devices quite often. And at the same time, like we had our oldest son, James, who was about to turn 2, and I just had a newborn, our second son, Jack. And Jack was a very fussy baby. He was a very intense baby, and I knew from my first round in postpartum that I needed something creative to kind of start feeling like myself again and get out of that postpartum haze.
Yeah.
So we were on our devices quite a lot, and we wanted to set a great example, or a good example, for our own kids, and we wanted to give James the opportunity to get to know screens in a very gentle way, because we didn't want to keep it from him until he was 18, because then like we felt like it would be hypocritical for us to like be on our screens all the time and he couldn't be. So we wanted to give him that opportunity to learn that for himself. At the same time, we also needed something to keep him occupied very safely, so we could tend to the newborn, because like I said, it was a very fussy baby and needed a lot of attention. So we were starting to look at apps for our kids, or like for the one kid, like the oldest kid, not for the newborn. And back then, the App Store's offerings weren't great for kids. It was all either very pedagogical, very ABC and 1, 2, 3 focused, when like James wasn't even 2 yet. He was not nonverbal, but he had a hard time talking, and it didn't feel right to introduce him to that amount of words and letters and numbers and interfaces and complicated menus when he wasn't nowhere near ready for learning that. Yeah. On the other hand, it was the very gamified kids apps that were very loud and very obnoxious and didn't feel like they were stimulating him in a good way. It was something that I didn't really want at my house, and I just figured that like an app would exist that was just like the toys on our playroom floor that our kid loved so much, but then on a device, and it didn't exist. So that's where like the little hobby project came from, where like my husband and I thought like we can just like make this ourselves in like as a small hobby project on the side, where I would be doing the animation. My husband wanted to try out an app called Game Maker to like make a very basic game, and the idea was that we would like, our son really enjoyed these giant books with like the big spreads where you could like see everything, like Where's Waldo, but like for toddlers, with like lots of vehicles and all kinds of things where you could just point at everything and be like, what sound does that vehicle make, or what does the cow say, stuff like that. We wanted to make that, but make it digital. So like if you would tap an object, it would do a little animation. That app or that game or that toy is still in PokPok as the busy book, so it's fun that just continued. I love that one. Like it started everything, and it's still there. So we just started making that, and after we had like the most janky prototype, which James loved very much, my husband showed that at GDC to Ryan and Jordan and Melissa from Snowman, and things kind of snowballed from there, as I always say.
So when did it become clear that this, I guess, was something that had to be kind of its own entity, like its business, I guess a business unto itself? At what point did you decide to make that pivot, I guess, and what made you make that decision?
I think the more we started brainstorming PokPok, and the more we started having these discussions of what could this app become in the future and what could this mean for kids, like it started all of these conversations between the 5 of us about how education hadn't changed over the past 100 years, and we had such amazing tools on our hands with the iPad, with the phone, with computers, that we felt education wasn't leveraging to its full potential, that we thought this could be something so much bigger and so much different from what Snowman had produced before, which was definitely more small, beautiful indie game projects aimed at adults. And if we wanted to really take PokPok to the moon, then it had to become its own business, which we then spun off with Melissa as our CEO, and she's absolutely crushing that. Like, I couldn't have picked a better CEO for that.
Yeah. How did Melissa become involved with the project, or decide or come on board to be the CEO?
So Melissa is Ryan's sister, and Ryan is one of the founders of Snowman, and she has a history working at Disney doing merchandise for baby and toddler products, and back then she had joined Ryan and Jordan and my husband at GDC because they had just launched Alto's Odyssey, and she was doing the marketing and the PR for that, or like she was helping them out doing that. So she was in the room when my husband was showing our janky prototype,
right,
to Ryan and Jordan, and she was just like looking at it, and she, having like the history at Disney and having like the history with like the work that she's been doing, she felt very strongly like she's never seen anything kids related looking like that before. Where I agreed, it's like it's a very different style that we picked that was very simplistic, as opposed to like a lot of the vector art or the 3D art that's so prevalent and so everywhere for kids.
The style of the whole visual look of it. There's not like loads of sort of gradients or big sort of shading areas. It's very, I don't want to say blocky colors because that makes it sound too simplistic, but it's kind of solid colors more than sort of, you know, super hyper detail stuff, which is, it makes it really beautiful, but also I imagine probably makes it less sort of hyperactive for kids.
Exactly. Yeah, I think kids are so bombarded with media from all sides these days that it's difficult for them to keep their focus. And when we were growing up, like the TV shows used to have like such a slower pace. Like the cuts in between the shots weren't as like as drastic. It wasn't as fast paced. It was still like, if you look at like the old Disney movies that are still hand drawn, if you look at like the old Pokemons, like these are all so slow paced that like we would be worried that kids of our this generation would think they're boring, but actually I still feel that they hold their attention pretty well, as opposed to like so many of the TV shows now where like they're all yelling at you of like, look at me, keep your attention to me, please don't click away, please don't tap on the next YouTube video or like zap away. Because when we were growing up, like we had like 2 TV channels if we were lucky, and you just had to wait around until your show came on. You had the one episode, and like that was like you had to make sure you were there because you didn't want to miss it. Whereas now there are so many different TV channels, there are so many different YouTube channels that are just like all screaming for your kids' attention, that like they have to overdo it to make sure that like they get the views and not someone else. And that's just like, it's increasingly bad, and it's increasingly more and more yelly and more distracting in a way, where I think PokPok is just trying to be a calm, safe space for your kid to just like hear their own thoughts. That's why PokPok also is relatively quiet compared to other apps. We don't have like, a lot of our toys don't have like a constant background soundtrack or anything. Like if we want it to be quiet, it's just quiet, so kids can fill in the blanks with their own brain, and that's also so much better for them to like hear themselves think.
Yeah, and there's no actual talking. There's no vocals on it. It's all sort of made up language. I'm gonna to the point where it does actually have my one of my favorite like earworms from the Busy book. And I don't know what that's become, like this earworm that I cannot get out of my head, but it's very much like that across the whole of the app, in that there's no language. It's kind of either sort of gobbledygook made up languages, or it's just sounds. How do you go about sort of capturing those for the app?
We have an amazing sound designer who just like, that's our permanent in-house sound designer, who records all of the voices himself. All of the female voices are by his wife. So they just made up the language. This was also, again, purely for efficiency's sake. It had an educational component to it, where like we wanted to convey emotions in a way sometimes, but also not impose on kids stories that they are telling themselves. So like, if they're playing and they're making up their own voices, and all of a sudden the character in the app says something that doesn't match with the story that they're making, it would take them out of it. And I feel like that just felt wrong to me. At the same time, if we had to go and record all of the sentences in every single language and make sure that they were correctly translated for all the kids to understand, like, and then like it's even different for translating for adults, where we can read in between the lines and understand like kind of what like the app is trying to say, but like for kids it has to be correct, because otherwise like who knows what they're learning. So that would have been an absolute financial headache and a logistical headache to get that done, especially for like when we're just trying to launch the app with our small team. So that's why the voices just made sense to be gibberish, and so kids could make up their own stories as they went, and we wouldn't be telling the kids what the app is thinking. Like they can just decide that for themselves, but also just because we didn't want to deal with the logistics of getting all of the languages translated. The funny thing is though that like the specific earworm that you have of the kid saying blah 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 something at the end, that is actually one of our users. Because
really?
1 or 2 years ago we had a competition for our like PokPok second or third birthday, where we launched a competition where people could be sending in, what was it? Like they could win an animated version of themselves in the Busy Book. And we have 3 families who ended up winning, and then we send them instructions on how to record their own voices to be in the app. And I think it's very they did such a great job, and it's so cute to hear their voices and have them just like be in the app.
Yeah, that's incredible. I love that. When you launch the app, you hear the PokPok play.
Yeah.
Who's doing that voice? I have a theory that it might be one of your children.
It's actually true.
Yes, got it right. Okay.
It's my oldest kid. It's James. When I was so happy that he finally got to do that, because he struggled for the longest time to pronounce a K. So he would say pot pot instead of pok pok. So when he finally, I think it was about like 4 years old when he finally learned how to say a K or how to pronounce a K. So we had to have him say pok pok in like 20 different times, and then we picked out the right one.
Yeah, that's great. It's such a nice sort of happy way of launching the app, is just to hear sort of a kid going pok pok in a really sort of like curious but sort of joyful way. I love that bit about it. So we're gonna go into your second pick, which is the piece of technology that you've been recently enjoying. You've got the Kobo reader. So what is it about the Kobo reader that you've been enjoying?
I got the Kobo e-reader for my birthday a couple of years ago from my sister. I've always been an avid reader growing up. Like I read all of the Harry Potter books back to back. Unfortunately, like the author has gone on her own little tangent, which makes me sad for the books because I still enjoy the books, and my kids are enjoying them now. But then I kind of fell out of it because just as a parent, I don't have a lot of time to read anymore, except for like when I'm like right before I go to bed. So at the same time, like as I said at the beginning, I'm always trying to, because I'm on screens so often, I'm trying to minimize how often I am on like the actual digital screens of like the computer, my iPad, my phone, trying to break out of like the social media dopamine stream habit. So I started to read very often as opposed to doom scrolling, and the e-reader makes that very easy for me just because I can always have it on hand. I don't have to lug around giant books with me everywhere I go. And I know that a lot of people still enjoy the feeling of like a physical paper copy in their hands.
Yes, my wife's like that too.
And like I completely agree with that. But there, for me, are so many more benefits to the e-reader and to the physical book. Like, for example, I can read in bed without my lights on because, like, it has like a little backlit situation. So, like, you can adjust like the settings for that as you go. I don't have I can read in bed. I don't have to have all of the lights on, so my husband can already sleep next to me. I can read lying on my side, so I don't have to sit up and like have the giant book.
Yes.
Going to the next page is just quiet as opposed to where I'm always in like I would be very mindful of. When I was on holiday, as we do every year over summer, we go to France, and I finished my book, I can just buy the next one straight there at the pool. I don't have to bring 3 different books with me on my holiday in my luggage when I can bring other things. So there are so many just like random little benefits that end up for me really being super helpful in breaking that screen time habit, helping me go on like a deeper level of concentration where like I otherwise like all of the social media with like there's been this whole like a lot of research about like how social media and reading on screens diminishes our attention span, because like even the news where like we used to have much more patience for reading long articles and long newspaper articles printed on paper or read books or in like for a longer sitting, and now everything is bite-sized because our attention span is so divided and because we are so distracted by so many different things that like the information has to be succinct and has to be very bite-sized and short so people get the gist. But that's also where like we lose a lot of the nuance too, and that's why there's so much black and white thinking. Like that's a whole other rant that I will not go on right now.
Yes.
But I'm just like I feel like reading helps me in so many different ways, and I think the e-reader made that possible for me to like get back into reading, where like since I've gotten it like a couple of years ago, I read so many, like I gone from like not reading at all to reading 70 books in a year.
Wow. Why? It was always a particular reason why you chose the Kobo over any of the other big array of e-readers?
That's what my sister gifted me, so I'm kind of stuck with that one, but I also do appreciate not funneling even more money into Jeff Bezos's pocket with like the Kindle.
Yes, I think that's that's always a good thing. Well, I've got so much I want to ask you about PokPok, so I want to get into more about the initial parts of PokPok and the inception of it. One of the great things about PokPok is that there isn't any in-app purchases, and it's a subscription model. I'm interested about why you went down that route and how it works as sort of a business model versus, I guess, things that are addictive and that encourage more in-app purchases. Did you make any like hard rules at the beginning that you were like, okay, no in-app purchases ever, or any other things like that going forward?
We have many rules. Like PokPok is like has many core pillars, as we call them, as opposed to rules. But like one of them is that like people go through our onboarding and then you have our paywall, and after that it's just for the kids. There are no other pop-ups that will bother them anymore to get them out of play. Same thing goes for like why we have no ads. Like that's also why people like why it's a subscription app, mostly just because we felt like with the couple of toys that we are making, we weren't able to make the impact that we wanted to. Like we knew from the beginning that like we wanted to make as many toys as we could over as long as we want to be and need to be working on it, to offer kids a very wide range of experiences and not just stick with the tried and true, like here's a couple of vehicles, here's like a dollhouse, here's a dress up game, stuff like that. Kids come for the town toy, come for the dinosaur toy, but they stick around then for the other experiences that we offer. Like we have a little sequencer music maker where they can just like try their hand at making music. That's like a little tool for them.
Yeah, I love that one.
Kids stick around for maybe the dress up game, maybe the town. Like there's so many different experiences that we are making for them where they can be learning new things that they didn't know before. Where, for example, like for my boys, they were always very big into the vehicles and into the cars and the fire trucks and everything. And if I don't offer them experiences like a dollhouse, for example, then how would they know that they maybe could enjoy a dollhouse, or maybe they do enjoy something nature related? But if I can't offer them that experience, because like as a parent, you're not necessarily going to buy a dollhouse or a doll for them if you don't know if they will like it necessarily. They could, but like it's a big purchase up front. And with PokPok, we can offer them a lot of different experiences that they can try out. That's all within the same subscription. So for us, that just made sense that we could launch something that we could keep building upon. And at the same time, the fact that you have to pay for, like, it's either like you pay for an app or you become the product by being bombarded with ads. And we didn't want that experience for kids because I think that's just, it doesn't fit what we want their experience to be. So that's why.
Yeah, absolutely. With the various toys, the experiences that you had, you started off with, I think, like 6. Is that correct? Yeah. And you now have about, well, like 18 or 19 or something like that, maybe?
I think it's 20.
20,
right
yeah. So you have a lot more now. I wondered, like, what was your decisions at the beginning in terms of like which toys you were going to start off with, and then also going forward, what forms your decisions and what is the process of deciding on what new toys to have, how you develop them and so forth? And is there any sort of toys, especially at the beginning, that you thought, right, I've got to have this one because I loved this as a kid, or my sons love this right now? What's the process that goes into deciding what goes in and when?
So at the beginning, we were just trying to we felt that like we had a certain price point in mind for what we want to launch at. And then we were trying to find like, what's the amount of toys that people would feel like, yes, this is worth starting that subscription and becoming an early adopter. Because like right now we have 20 toys, and people can already see that that's like a robust experience for kids to be engaging with, and there's lots of different things for them to do. But at the same time, at the beginning, when we only had 6 toys, like, we needed people to already see the value of that. So that's why we were just trying to kind of put our eggs in like many different baskets, and just have like one with vehicles, one that was a little bit more esoterical with like we call it musical blobs, which is still in there, but it's like, it's a special one. We had the silly blocks, which was aimed more at the youngest. We had the busy book, like there were like a couple of ones. And then the first one that we, like the first update, like the first new toy that we launched a month after was House, or like our doll house, because that felt like this is a nice solid first update that would immediately get people to see the value. To also kind of like answer your previous question with that as well, it's always a difficult trade-off, or like it's a very difficult balance to have something that is explicitly non-addictive, but still make something that kids want to come back to, and have parents at the same time see the value of their kids coming back to that over and over again. Interestingly, like, we never made PokPok to be non-addictive, because it's very hard to just like set out and invent something that works yet is non-addictive. But we do get so many reviews every single day of parents saying, my kid doesn't throw a tantrum after when screen time is over.
Yeah.
And I think that is kind of playing into like the fact that PokPok doesn't have any rules, doesn't have any winning or losing, doesn't have like that another level to beat, or like another point to score, or another thing to collect. Even the very open-ended games like Animal Crossing, for example, can still be very addicting in a way, because like there's always like that one more thing to do that makes it very hard to stop when you're in the middle of something. Whereas PokPok, it's as simple as just like going into your playroom, you pick up a toy, you do something else. Like, there's a lot of seamless activity going on where kids just like flutter from one thing to the next. And PokPok integrates so well in that same way of playing, in that same style of playing, that it's very easy for them to, like, I'm not saying no kid will ever throw a tantrum when screen time is over with PokPok. Like, it's like going with your kid to the playground and saying, and like, oh, it's time to go home, and your kid's like, okay, thanks mom for the playground. Like, they will be sad when like they have to leave the playground. And I think like the same thing can be true for PokPok, but we've had so many parents say that like this is a very calm, mindful option for their kids that doesn't get them all riled up because there's like so many things going on at the same time. And PokPok is just like, it's a calm experience for kids, because I needed it to be a calm experience for my kids and for me as a parent, because I didn't want like that sound blaring in the background constantly. I didn't want to have like the nursery rhymes earworms always in my head constantly. It's a calm experience because I wanted it to be a calm experience for my kids and for myself, because I couldn't deal with like the noise all the time.
I think one thing when I recommend PokPok is I say that there's normally, I normally say like, it's great. It feels like she's like learning stuff, and it's very kind of Montessori. It's very, I guess like a constructive play in a way. But two of the things I always say is that most of the time she's fine at the end of a session, and she doesn't throw a tantrum. We've had them, occasionally that does happen as normal. And but also sometimes she gets bored of it. Like, sometimes she'll be on it for 10 minutes, then she'll be like, I don't want to do it anymore. And that's like, traditionally wouldn't be what you would be going for. But sometimes, as with any sort of play, she's like, nah, I actually don't want to do this. I want to go and my daughter's obsessed with just taking a piece of paper and then cutting it up just continuously until it's into shreds. So sometimes she'll be like, I don't want to do that. I just want to cut a piece of paper up for 20 minutes. And that's fine. That's like totally normal. I wonder how you go about figuring out the addictiveness of it. Do you have like, how are you measuring that? Do you have any like studies or experts that are looking at this, or how are you figuring that all out?
We are working with experts, with educators, with we even have like a neuroscientist that we consult with from time to time. So PokPok is definitely backed by the right people who know their stuff. At the same time, they've never had to call us back from anything or be like, oh, this is like way out of line, or like you're completely in the wrong with this. So everything is just based on like a gut feeling mostly.
Yeah.
And at this point, I can confidently say that like our entire team are all experts in what makes play fun and what makes play interesting, and the balance between making something non-addictive but still fun enough that you want to continue playing or you want to continue coming back to it is a hard one. And at the same time, it's an easy one, because we all know from experience that kids just have these phases that they're like super obsessed with something, and then they leave it for like a couple of weeks and then they come back to it. That's all fine. We don't want your kids to be obsessed with the iPad, but we want parents to have like a tool in their back pocket that they can confidently whip out when they need their kids to stay calm and occupied for a little while on the plane, at the doctor's office, at a restaurant, just when they need like a minute to think for themselves without their kid interrupting them constantly, where you know that there's like where the kids are safe and happy and calm, not getting riled up. And you don't have to make that trade-off of like, okay, I give them screen time now, but I will have to deal with the yelling and the mess and the tantrums later. We are just trying to make parents feel good about using technology for their kids to help them and know that they're safe and occupied.
And I guess it's not also just about like filling time as well, so you get time off as well. It's actually just introducing them to sort of digital devices in a healthy way. And like I sit with my daughter, and we will play on the app, or she will show me something that she's doing. So it's not just about like being something that's just like a babysitter for the kids. It's actually introducing them to digital devices. And I think it was from the neuroscientist, but it was something along the lines of trying to pretend that we're not in a digital world is foolish. Like, we are in a digital world. There's no changing that. So keeping kids away from digital devices is just a recipe for disaster. So what we need to think about more is like how we introduce them and how they interact with them. Is that maybe your sort of main approach to PokPok?
Exactly. Like we're setting the bar high in a way, I guess, for the screen time and the media that they interact with. I think when kids' apps started to become a thing years ago, when like the App Store became a thing, when kids' games were coming out, I think a lot of people just took games as it existed for adults, slapped the kids' IP on there, cute animals, big eyes, high-pitched voices, and called it a day, because like that's what worked for the adults. But like it still had all of the addictive mechanisms with the levels to beat and the points to score, all of that, like the short circuit dopamine cycles that you keep getting stuck in with games, like that was all still present. But that's not what kids need, and that's not how they we as adults, we can understand like how that works, and even then for us it's hard to step away from that. We can't expect kids to be fully regulated while experiencing like a barrage of information coming at them. So we just wanted to, like, when we started making PokPok, we really tried to reinvent that from the ground up with as little friction as possible, just getting to play with as little rules, because we were super confident that kids could make up the rules as they went and just like do that themselves. Like that would totally be fine. They can make it as hard or as difficult or as easy for themselves as they wanted to. Kids will find the fun in anything if you let them and if you give them the opportunity to do that. At the same time, while I'm glad that we can provide like the safe babysitter for kids, as it sometimes just needs to be with PokPok, I'm also happy to hear that like you also enjoy playing with your kid, because that means like it's in the same way how as parents we're not going to enjoy sitting in on like the CoComelon style videos, for example. Like that doesn't really contribute to like our joy necessarily, as opposed to watching Mr. Rogers or watching the Pixar movies. Like these are made with adults and kids in mind, both of them, and there's like something for everyone, and they're not afraid to tackle the hard subjects, and they're not afraid to tackle like the bigger stories, and making them in a way that where like every age can get something out of that. And we've always like I've just made PokPok, or like I came up with PokPok in a way where I also enjoyed what it was making. It was just as much for me as it was for the kids. And we hear from so many parents that they also enjoy playing with their kids because we're not dumbing things down. It's not a very narrow age margin of like, this is like your kid is 3. This is what it's going to learn. This is what it has to know, because kids evolve at such wildly different rates that like what one 3-year-old can do, like another 3-year-old is already way ahead of, or is maybe like not at all capable of doing yet.
Yeah.
So who are we to say like this, like PokPok is for like a 3-year-old and like this is what the 3-year-old is getting? There's something fun for everyone, even for the adults. It's very funny that like even Melissa was showing PokPok to her grandparents, and her grandfather kept saying like, you have to get this into like the hands of the elderly because there's so much like fine motor skills and like critical thinking involved that like people with dementia could be benefiting from as well. So again, like it's not a childish interface. We're not dumbing things down for kids. It's not about making things simple and bite-sized for them. Like there is a challenge, and like some things will be hard for like a 3-year-old to be doing, but they can recognize that challenge and be like, I want to understand. I'm frustrated that I can't do this yet, but I want to learn how to do it. And I want to try and figure it out. Very similar to like how I was with iMovie back in the day.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah, there definitely some of the toys that my daughter wasn't quite, she'd sort of looked at the beginning when she was sort of just like 2 and a bit. And she kind of couldn't really get to grips with them, and now she's like obsessed with them. So which is great as an app as well, to sort of have this arc of things that they can keep discovering and keep learning. We'll be back to find out Esther's everything pick in just a minute. But this is the part of the show when we take a break to look into the past to talk about a piece of technology that you might not have heard of. Weird, ahead of its time, an abject failure or success. Whatever it was certainly something. Since the start of the AI boom, kicked off by ChatGPT in 2022, one of the most significant contributions to the world of tech has been the abilities of LLMs to assist with and even completely write code for developers. But would it surprise you that this was already possible back in 2018? Or was it? In June of that year, Engineer.ai launched Builder, an AI for building apps and websites. The company advertised it as, quote, as easy as ordering a pizza. Any user could take an idea, choose from a list of features, and using AI, Builder would deploy a library of components to make a product in a fraction of the time it would normally take, or without the user needing to know a line of code. The industry was intrigued, and Engineer.ai raised a Series A investment of $29.5 million. The future of AI-enhanced coding seemed upon us. But then things seemed to take a turn for the worse. Recent executive hire Robert Holtheim was fired in early 2019 for trying to point out problems. Holtheim pointed out in a lawsuit he filed for wrongful termination that the company had a set of books with fake number of investors. Engineer.ai denied the accusations, settled with Holtheim, and rebranded as Builder.ai. The company kept growing until it reached a $1.5 billion valuation, with Microsoft and the Qatar Investment Authority making huge investments. Then, investors started to wonder why the company wasn't actually making any money. It was discovered that Builder was cooking the books and claiming revenue over $100 million more than it actually was making. Attempts were made to revive the company's fortunes, but it eventually filed for bankruptcy in May 2025. As that was happening, a source revealed the company's Natasha neural network, as well as the original Builder product, was actually 700 Indian programmers, leading people to jerk that the AI in Builder AI really meant, actually, Indians. Builder denied the claim and said that AI sells and automation does not. So, was it really AI? I'll let you be the judge, but I know the emperor's clothes when I don't see them. So we're going to go on to your last pick now, which is your everything pick. This is the piece of technology that has meant everything to you. You touched on this earlier on, but tell us about your pick.
My pick, the device that meant everything for me, is the iPad Pro. The reason why I picked that is because for me, like where like the little camera kickstarted my digital journey, the iPad Pro specifically kickstarted my PokPok journey. And without that specific device, I don't think PokPok would have been invented. So for me personally, like it's a very meaningful piece of technology. So when I was in school for animation, like first off, like you started drawing on paper, obviously, like, but if you were going to make a digital animation or a digital hand-drawn animation, it would be on these little drawing tablets where you would be like, it would be on your desktop. You would be holding the pen in one hand, but like not looking at your hand, but like looking at the screen and drawing. And that was like you learn to make do with that and you learn to like use it, but it wasn't like ideal. So in my final year of college for animation, I invested, I should say, because it was very expensive. I invested in a Cintiq, which is like a very big screen where you could draw on, like it was a drawing tablet, like you could draw on it, but it was also a screen. So like finally you could be looking at your hand and drawing at the same time. And that was very convenient for like the minutia of animation. So I really love drawing on that. The downside was that like while it was like nice and large, it was an absolute monolith of a thing. Like it was sitting, like it had to be on a desktop. It had to be attached by like 3 or 4 different cables to your computer. It's like a giant battery thing with like a plug-in and everything. It was very unwieldy to be working on. And like you had like these little squeezers to like just put it lower or higher up depending on how you wanted to be drawing. It was like it was very good at what it was supposed to be doing, but it was very unwieldy and not convenient for me at all. Then fast forward a couple of years later, I had my kid. I wanted to be like, we were doing art for Snowman on the Cintiq. Everything was fine. But then Apple announced like the iPad Pro with the drawing pencil. And we both got an iPad for ourselves. Like my husband and I both like had our own iPads. And all of a sudden I could be on the couch drawing. I had the newborn next to me. I didn't have to bring the newborn with me up into our studio to be working here, because that would be like sitting at the Cintiq on your computer drawing something. That was a commitment. And if you couldn't like only draw 5 minutes, that like it took a while to set up, like it took like boosting up Photoshop and everything. It was very like there were a lot of like many points of friction to just get to draw and then sit there, and like if the newborn would start crying, like it would just mess everything up, and I couldn't really bother with drawing a lot then.
Yeah.
But then with the iPad Pro, I could be on my couch. The newborn was next to me. He was sleeping or crying. I could put it down. I could take it back. I was drawing in Procreate, which I still use to this day because I think it's such a wonderful piece of software. It's so, again, like it's a very simple tool that you can use to like do so many different things with if you know how to manipulate it, as opposed to Photoshop, which has so many bells and whistles that I feel like most people don't even use.
Is Procreate the main app that's used to create the illustrations in PokPok?
It used to be, but now all of the art is made in Toon Boom Harmony, which is like actual animation software as opposed to like just me for sketching. But like if I have to draw for PokPok, if I draw for PokPok and not necessarily animating, I will do it in Procreate for sure.
Like if you're visualizing things, ideas and stuff.
Exactly.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Just want to dive a little bit more into some of the maybe more complex areas of PokPok. One thing that I love personally, and I think is really fantastic about PokPok, is the representation within it. So you've got a huge diverse range of, I guess, family structures and ethnicities. But you also celebrate Pride Month, which is, I think, certainly notable. I wonder if you've had any pushback from people regarding those sorts of things, and has it been, I think, especially in this climate of like, you know, trying to get rid of DEI in America and those sorts of things. I wonder how you've managed those. Do you just plow your own furrow, you're just ignoring those, and like how does that come about, and whether you've had any pushback and what it has been?
So we get pushback relatively regularly, but especially during Pride Month, because we're always like like theoretically not a lot is even changing in the app. It's mostly a marketing beat for Pride. So like the equal representation of everyone, of like the diverse world that we're living in, is in PokPok year round. And I think like we wouldn't be much of an ally if we are just like a company that like jumps on like the hype of Pride Month and then deletes everything the month after. So for us, one of our core pillars is that we think it's very important for kids to have both windows and mirrors into the world. Mirrors to kind of see themselves and their family reflected, however that might look like, whether they have like where they're like have a disability, or look a little different, or their family looks different from what the norm is, or their friends look different from what the norm is, because it's so important for their own self-confidence and for how they experience the world, that like they get to see themselves and their family and their friends represented in that. On the other hand, we want to offer them windows into the world to experience the beautiful, diverse offerings of our world, and like how different everyone looks and feels. And we have a very big world that we're living in, and kids often see like such a narrow view of that represented in media, where I think we can do a lot better. And for PokPok, even like it will always be an ongoing process. Like we are not perfect and we will make mistakes, and we are always just trying to improve that offering, or that these opportunities to kids, to like what we are showing them. But it's been tough sometimes. It's so sad to see people hate on that specific fact and give us bad reviews, or leave bad hateful comments. We get the hateful email from time to time. It's not necessarily that bad, but it wouldn't ever cause us to back down from that standpoint, because in the end, like the LGBTQ community, the diverse community, the diverse world that we live in, is not going anywhere. I don't think we would be surviving as a company if we like back down from that. It's just something that we keep standing for, especially in this climate where it's like more important every day to continue showing up for all of them. But for all the hate that we've been getting, we've had 10 times more allies sticking up for us, sticking up for the queer community, and just making their voice be heard. And we are always so grateful and so touched by everyone rallying. So for how much hate we sometimes get, there's always so much more love and interaction and community, and we are so incredibly grateful for that.
Yeah, I love that answer. That's well said. You've mentioned before that you suffer from ADHD, and I wonder how that figures into your approach to the experiences that you offer within PokPok.
We never made PokPok with like the neurodiverse spectrum on the front of our mind, especially because we feel like they are such a part of intrinsic good design of accessibility, that like it was just a given. We never made anything specific for them, just because like it has to work for everyone, not just for neurotypical people and not just for neurodiverse people. With like, I think me having ADHD and being very like highly sensitive to sounds and to noises and being very easily overstimulated, I think did play a part in like the original design for PokPok, where like I was easily overstimulated by like the yelling of the TV and like the constant sounds, and I wanted to avoid that. A substantial piece of our audience is on the neurodiverse spectrum, just because PokPok is built very mindfully with them in mind, but also not just specifically for them. It's just a nice app that works for so many different people, and a lot of kids on the neurodiverse spectrum find their calm and find their safe space in PokPok, and I'm very happy about that.
Yeah, I can imagine that PokPok's is a really great thing for people who are autistic and maybe very aware of like big sounds, and some kids of it, sometimes they have to be going out with like the big mufflers on their heads, and because of just the big sounds of outdoors, I imagine that PokPok's a very relaxing and centering space for them.
Yeah, we've worked with Laura from the OT Butterfly, and she's an occupational therapist for kids on the neurodiverse spectrum. And she, for example, like one of the very interesting inputs that she gave us very early on is that it's nice how kids can control the sound in PokPok. So like, and that's specifically nice for kids on the spectrum, where they are in charge of when a sound plays and when it's not playing, as opposed to like just a constant stream of background noise and loud sounds that you can hear very very often in other kids media. Whereas with PokPok, it's like you are in charge of when a sound plays or when it doesn't play, and when you could just like, if you want it to be quiet, you can just have it be quiet. And at the same time, there's also many very soft sounds, very ASMR sounds. Our sound designer does such an incredible job at that.
Yeah, the sound's fantastic.
It's all hand recorded with like, he will just like sit in his studio and record like a wooden stick on a tin can and just like be tapping like that, and it'll sound amazing. I don't know how he does it. But I think like a lot of kids, we've even gotten like reviews from teenagers using PokPok saying like, I am on the spectrum and I use this to self-regulate, or as like a stimming tool where like they just like repeat the same sound over and over again because it sounds nice or it feels nice. And I've been known to do that myself, so that's just nice to hear.
Yeah, I've had a fiddle around myself, I've got to be honest. In fact, preparing for this interview, I was like having a little flick through the app and found myself diving into it, for disappearing for about, I don't know, like 20 minutes or so, just like pressing on various sounds.
It's very easy to get lost in it for a little bit. I tend to do that myself sometimes.
Yeah. So I guess lastly with PokPok, what are your plans going forward for the app? Like, what is your, as much as I guess you can share, of your vision for PokPok, I guess, as a company, and PokPok Playground as an app?
So, like, the overall vision for the company and for the product that we're making is that we want PokPok to, like, the goal is to have PokPok be like an established brand in a way where parents know, like, this is high quality, my kids will learn from this is educational, and this feels safe. So, especially for like the first introductions to screen time, we want PokPok to be people's go-to of like, yes, like my toddler is going to be ready for screen time soon. I know what I'm going to get, just because like it's known as like a solid product. So like that is like the overarching goal for what we want like the app to be, what we want the brand to be. Since a couple of months, my husband and I have pivoted slightly away from producing or helping producing toys, because with our team growing, it had become a little bit unwieldy for us to be the only ones in Belgium and still being part of like the entire production cycle when like everyone else was in Toronto. And my husband and I have kind of pivoted back to our origins in a way, where like we are currently producing YouTube content for PokPok to help, on the one hand, widen the scope of people who get to learn about PokPok existing, but also just like to, again, like in the same way how we made the app to help introduce some goodness on the App Store for kids when there was like a lot of overwhelming stuff that we didn't approve of. We want to do like the same thing for YouTube, which we are well aware that it's going to be like a very uphill battle. And that's also not to say like there's not good content for kids on YouTube, but there's also overwhelmingly annoying or overstimulating content, and we are trying to make something that is softer and gentler and kinder, and aimed at like, I want to say between 2 and 5 will enjoy it the most, but my kids also still enjoy watching our little shorts. So we're back to our roots with like stop motion animation, with playing with physical toys as well as PokPok. So like there's kind of like the episodes are like 5-6-ish minutes long, with various little scenes just like cut together of like us playing with physical vintage toys, wooden toys, a little bit of PokPok, some stop motion. it's all very kind of very gentle, and hopefully inspires kids to be like, oh, I have that toy, I want to go play with that, or oh, I like this app looks fun, I want to go play with that app. We are launching a new episode every Friday. The channel is called Studio PokPok.
Fantastic. Oh, I'm looking forward to that. I definitely, I've kept my daughter totally away from YouTube just because I don't really know where to start in terms of videos that aren't going to be like overstimulating. So it certainly seems like a good idea using the PokPok brand to give people I guess like a direction and a place to go to. So before we finish, I like to finish the podcast on a positive note. By asking my guests about something in tech that is giving them hope or is making them happy about the future. I think, as we touched on earlier on, sometimes these times we live in can be a little bit depressing, or can bring you down a bit. So have you got anything on your eye on that's keeping you positive about the world of tech?
It's going to be very counterproductive, counterintuitive for me to say that, but honestly, also social media. Like, while I'm conscious of like that it's a bad habit to break sometimes, and it can very easily result in doom scrolling, I also really enjoy all of the inspiring people that I meet on there. I follow like other artists, I follow politicians that inspire me, and I think it's such it can be such a nice way to connect with people and be inspired in a way that I wouldn't have been before, that I can see the next generation interacting with screens and with social media. And while it can turn very bleak, I think there's also like a part of like our like the young generation now that is on social media that stems me very hopeful in a way for them to be doing the right thing. So I think it's two sides of the same coin, but I'm positive that we will get there at some point.
Yeah, I think sometimes there is the algorithm. If you can fight the algorithm enough and get it to show you what you want, then it can be good.
My algorithm is like tuned to a T of like exactly what I want. I'm very conscious about like the things that I interact with and the things that I like. So like what I am interacting with on social, like I'm very lucky that like while it's a bad habit to break and all of that, and I would like to be on my phone a little less, at the same time, I know that I will get like the content I like to be watching, and that wouldn't disturb me all that much. And that just like mostly inspires me to like go out and go into my backyard and work in my vegetable garden, or like go offline and make a new little painting, because I'm also making like miniature paintings in my spare time. I'm trying to get back into like pastel crayons. I want to do oil painting. I want to do ceramics. Like there's so many inspiring people sharing their craft, and I have way too little time and way too many hobbies that I want to do or try out or learn.
Great. Oh, well, I'm glad that you've managed to corral the algorithm into getting you what you want. Yeah. Well, thank you so much, Esther. This has been a fascinating chat. We've gone long, but I've really enjoyed every moment. And thank you again for everything you're doing at PokPok. I think it's a wonderful app. And if anyone listening has not tried it out, even if you don't have kids, give it a look. It's a wonderful, inspiring, gentle, and loving app, I think. So thank you, Esther, for your time.
Thank you for the kind words, and thank you for having me. This was very fun.
And that's it for First Last Everything. Thanks again to Esther for joining me. Esther was also kind enough to provide me with an exclusive code for listeners to receive 25% off a subscription. I would really recommend trying PokPok, as I'm sure you've gathered from the interview, it's made a huge difference in our daughters' lives and our lives. You can find links to everything we discussed in the show notes, where you'll also find links to find me online and a link to our feedback form. This is a Mac Stories podcast. Head to macstories.net/podcast to check out all the other shows. Thanks to the amazing Will Laporte, who does our music, and of course thanks to you for listening. I'll see you next time, where my guest will be the musician and co-founder of AI startup Newtone, Andrew Fife. I hope you'll join me.